from the moment you're born till the moment you die, basically, is an integral part of your life every step of the way. Yet we don't really have much of a conversation in this country. We do when we think of low middle income countries, it's talked about all the time. But how often do you hear people talking about it in the UK?
Hi, I'm Laura Nielsen and welcome to Hope in the Deep End. We've put together this podcast to inspire us all to keep working in areas of deprivation and poverty. We're sharing best practice, stories, outcomes and some interesting thoughts and ideas. So whether you're working in primary care, secondary care, the charity sector or any of the other myriad of roles, please listen and help us to keep each other inspired. So welcome back to the Hope of the Deep End podcast. Today I am talking to Monica Lakhanpaul, who's an amazing paediatrician, and she inspires me. She's incredibly bouncy, positive, enthusiastic. And today we are enthusiastically going to talk about toilets. I have to say, obviously, I know a fair bit about toilets, only that I go to the toilet quite often. I have been known to fix a toilet by taking the lid off. But apart from that, I've not really considered anything about toilets. So the education starts now. So Monica, welcome.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Laura, for those very kind words. If people could see me now, they'd see me bouncing around as we're going to talk about this exciting topic, very close to my heart.
Wow, I'm slightly nervous. I have been to the toilet already, which is good. But yeah, let's see where this goes.
Yes, sounds interesting.
So where are you working at the moment, Monica? What's your background?
So I'm a paediatrician, a practicing paediatrician. So I see children in my clinic up in North London under Whittington Trust in Haringey. I have multiple hats on, for those who know me. I'm also a professor of child health at UCL, University College London, at the Institute of Child Health. And there I work with an engineer, Priti Parekh, who really taught me a lot about the engineering side of toilets, and I know about the health side of toilets. And then I also travel around the world doing projects in India, in Africa, and of course here in the UK as well.
That's amazing. Right, so you're proper clever. You proper know what you're talking about. So this is going to be good. So go on, tell me. Obviously, when I was at medical school, actually before I was at medical school, when I was about 16, I did the history of medicine in my history GCSE. I don't know why we didn't learn about the world wars and stuff, but we didn't. But in the history of medicine, one of the things we did learn about was the cholera outbreaks in London and the Pudding Lane and all that kind of stuff. So the link between toilets and health we know about, don't we, in terms of our history and also, I guess, maybe third world countries. But what is it about toilets and this country that you think we should all know about?
Well, I think toilets, the conversation about toilets is quite hidden. And I think people don't realise, if you think about it, what do we do every day? You know, you get up in the morning, you go to the toilet, you probably go multiple times during the day. But how often do you actually stop and think, how it makes you feel when you go into that room where the toilet is, how it makes you feel when you come out of that toilet. It affects your mental health, it affects your physical health, it affects how you interact with other people. And of course, you know, it's part and parcel of everybody's life from the moment you're born till the moment you die, basically. It's an integral part of your life every step of the way. Yet we don't really have much of a conversation in this country. We do when we think of low middle income countries, it's talked about all the time. But how often do you hear people talking about it in the UK, saying, actually, what's the right to a toilet? What type of toilet should that be? What about males and females? I mean, there's always a little bit of conversation around that. You know, should we have separate toilets for males and females? And, you know, where should the baby have their nappy changed? But then we don't really expand on that. And we don't really think holistically, like, okay, if I'm constipated, how does that affect me? Or if I don't have soap and I can't afford soap, how do I physically wash my hands? So we don't really delve into all of those things. And that's why I was really excited about today, because, you know, we can think about it in what does the toilet look like? How does it make me feel? Is it cold? Do I feel I'm going to fall into it? How is it shaped? The environment you sit in, such as, you know, what if there's a cockroach on the floor or there's a mouse while you're going to the toilet, and how does that make you feel? And then also, you know, your physical health in the way that do you actually have access to a toilet whenever you need to have access? Or are you like on a motorway and suddenly like, oh my God, I have to go to the toilet and I can't find somewhere? Or do you really have to find that place for your little baby to go to the toilet, or your child when they're going for a walk? And again, what do you do with them when they're getting very upset and they can't go to the toilet? So I think the whole aspect around toilet equality, inclusion, who can use them, who can't use them, is there an inequality gap there? I think it's actually a really big conversation.
That's really fascinating. So I've never really thought about this before, but you, as you were describing going to the toilet, you were bringing back memories of like my primary school days. So the toilets at my primary school were like, I don't know why they didn't have loo seats really. So you just had to sit on the toilet. And obviously when you're smaller, your bottom just clunks down easier, doesn't it? So like I generally have memories of my like bottom touching the water in the toilet. And it just been so cold. And also they had that stuff. I mean, I don't think you could buy it anymore, thankfully, but that paper, that toilet paper that was like really harsh and scratched your bottom when you like used it. Do you know what I mean? And then your fingers went through it. So yeah, you're right. All those things. And I guess the only time I've really struggled with toilets was at school, which maybe we can talk about the impact on children. So, you know, there was a whole thing about what's going to happen in the toilet. Are you going to be beaten up in the toilet? There was a whole thing about asking permission to go. And that was always, I was quite shy as a child, I think. So I was always really nervous. I was acutely embarrassed of having to go to the toilet. So yeah, all those memories of like taking down your woolly tights and being cold is all coming back to me, Monica.
I might have traumatized you now by this conversation. But you know, we had when I was, of course, like I said, I'm a paediatrician, so people think that you just focus on the ill health of the child, but actually a lot of my practice was talking to children about toilets, because what happened to them in afterwards, like did they have a urine infection or did they have constipation, sometimes stemmed from the school toilet. And so actually when I was writing the guidelines, I was a clinical director for the Nice Children's Guidelines a long time ago. And one of them was on urinary tract infections and one of them was on constipation. So actually at that time, we started talking a lot about school toilets and how it impacted on children. And the strange thing is, just you've talked about that, you know, not having a seat on and am I going to fall in the toilet? I remember there's one child I looked after who actually used to think he was going to fall into the toilet. And I'm sure there's many, many other children who do feel that as well, when they're trying to climb onto it and then angle themselves slightly wrong and then think they're going to fall in. And how scary is that? And I don't think people realize how frightening that is. It's just like, oh, yeah, it's fine. It's not fine, actually. Children are very frightened. And one of the little boys that I spoke to, he was scared of, I don't know if you ever remember it, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but the toilet duck advert where there's germs keep popping up out the toilet. And he was absolutely terrified about that. And he ended up seeing a surgeon for his constipation, numerous doctors for his constipation, and nobody could sort out what was wrong with him. And it's only after a few meetings that I had with him and kept trying to find out what was going on here, because why is he not getting cured from this? Did he actually open up and said, well, I don't want to go to the toilet because those germs are going to eat my bottom up. And I'm actually so frightened that I just hold on to it every time I try to go to the toilet. And that's really when I started realizing first the importance of talking to children about their experiences and thinking about how could we make it a better place for children and adults. But school is one key place. You know, it's like, are you too frightened to ask to go? If you go, who's around the corner waiting to bully you? If you go in and there's no toilet paper there, what do you do then? Do you ask for help? How do you find the toilet paper? All of these things that go on in your brain that really nobody really delves into. And then, as we know now recently, there's been this whole issue in the newspaper, I know, about locking toilets because people are worried about what will happen in the toilets. Are there going to be gangs there? Is somebody going to use drugs, or is something else going to happen? So it's an interesting place as well as an activity.
Yeah, and we've definitely heard of schools in our area where kind of managing the toilet seems to be part of the management, the behaviour of all the kids. So I totally see why they came to the conclusions they came to, but they've essentially reduced access to toilets so much to children and made it such a high barrier to go. You couldn't go in lessons at all. Obviously the break times now are quite short, actually. So we've had kids come through the surgery who basically don't drink all day, don't eat all day, because they're trying to avoid ever going to the toilet at home. And I mean, at school. And that just can't be good, can it? That cannot be good for your learning, for your body, for your mental health, for everything.
It's not good for you at all. I mean, starting from just like your mental health, if you're anxious, will I be able to go to the toilet? Will a teacher tell me off? Well, already you're raising anxiety in a child. And then on top of that, you're in school and you're thinking, well, what will my friends say to me? And what if I can't get to the toilet? You know, is that going to mean you have an accident at school? I mean, I know children do have accidents at school. And that was why we really fought for open access for children at school, in school toilets many, many years ago. And it just feels like we might be going back to right round in a circle again. And like I said, and then if you can't go to the toilet and you're not drinking, we all know that urinary tract infections is linked to not having enough fluid. So you're going to be dehydrated. And if you're not hydrated, then you can't learn. There's been a lot of evidence about put water on the table, because if you drink water, you're going to be more alert and you're going to learn better. So there's this sort of balancing act going on between drink water, no, don't drink water. And it's really hard for children.
Yeah, and I think that whole thing, I think the physiological stress of being thirsty does kind of tip your brain into something different, doesn't it? And also your body into something different. And that kind of pattern, if we're asking, or children are ending up doing that, that just cannot be good. Never mind the kind of urine infections that almost inevitably happen, but just the thirst, managing your thirst, is a massive like psychological overlay.
Exactly. And it's you know, it's also a fundamental right for everybody to have access for a toilet. So the fact that for children, we're locking them up, and for adults, we would never even dream of doing that, would you? If you were at work now, do you think that, you know, you'd all sit there and lock the toilet door so that nobody could go? No, it's a right to go when you want to go.
Yeah, it's true. I'm interested in the kind of constipation conversation, because a lot of doctors and nurses and health visitors, we end up talking a lot about constipation, don't we? And I mean, I've definitely been, you know, down the teaching line of, you know, if they're constipated, you do disimpaction regimes, you give them a shed load of Movicol, you know, you make it run like sloppy, and then you kind of do maintenance dose. And so it's interesting to hear you talk that constipation is so much more than just a kind of laxative issue.
Yes, if you were in one of my surgeries when the trainees are there, that they get used to my my toilet and constipation talk all the time. So I work with children with Down syndrome particularly, and children with Down syndrome do tend to get more constipated. So again, it's something I talk a lot with mothers about, but it's important, I think, generally, not just for children with Down syndrome. But I always start with, okay, let's get through the toilet habit. When does a child wake up in the morning? What's the toilet like? Do they like going to the toilet? Do they avoid going to the toilet? Is it a shared toilet? Is it a single toilet? Is somebody banging on the door outside, so frightening that child? So all of these behavioral and environmental things that are going on, I try and tease through those first. And then, yes, of course, we get to the medicine, but the medicine's not going to cure the problem, because the medicine's only going to be a short-term relief, really, of what's happening. And then I talk about the balloon and how your bowel is like a bag. So if once you get constipated, you basically, your bowel just stretches and stretches, and then it has to remember how to squeeze again. So we want that child to be in a routine of going to the toilet. So yes, you need the Movicol to allow that to happen. And you need the Movicol for long enough and for frequently enough to make it happen, because people are always afraid they're going to get addicted to Movicol. I keep saying, no, that's not the situation at all. But once you've got over that, I keep saying, well, it takes quite a long time for children then to get back into a routine of going to the toilet. But there's no point giving loads of Movicol, making them do all of the diarrhea and horrible things that go with that. And then the next day they go back to the toilet, terrified again, not drinking again, avoiding the toilets again, and you're back into the same cycle you were in. So it's all about prevention as well, and preventing people from getting into this situation, but, you know, helping them once you get them out of it. It's more tricky. I think it's an art and a science. I really do. Not as easy as what people say it is.
No, and if it was, we'd have solved the problem, wouldn't we? And yeah, we have like cyclical clinics full of constipated kids and frustrated parents. And I remember my lovely niece had some problems with constipation, and she's just, you know, absolutely delightful child. But this became such a battle zone in the household and such a stress for everybody. And I remember looking after her. I can't remember how old she would have been now, probably about 3. And sitting with her in the bathroom and singing Frozen, let it go, let it go. It seemed an apt toilet song at that moment. But it can become a right battleground, can't it? It can become a very emotional issue for everybody in the house.
Well, if you think, again, I'm very mindful of people who sometimes don't have a toilet either. And some people who, like I said, are in shared toilets or bed and breakfast or in other accommodation. But even if you have your own toilet, you can have so many problems. And like you said, it becomes a battleground. That adds to the problem, because as soon as it becomes, everybody becomes heightened in their emotion and start raising their voices, and it's like becomes a fight between child and parent, actually you've lost the battle already, because already your whole body's going to seize up and you're going to start squeezing more, and you're going to start holding things in. But so the psychological side and the physical side are all connected, basically. So if you can give a child, and it's hard to do this when you're all running around trying to get ready for school and everybody wants to use the toilet at the same time, but then talking it through maybe with the child afterwards so that it isn't such a short term, I'm going to tell you off, you've done something wrong, you're a bad child because you're constipated. And on the other side, the parents often feel they're a failure. My child's the one who's constipated. My child's the one who's going to get runny stools when they go to school. And that combination of the child feeling bad and the parents feeling bad, and then you get all the external parties who tell you what you should eat and shouldn't eat. And then you become even more worried about, are you a good parent or not? So there's this whole sort of wicked problem that you're trying to untangle without really realizing it. But it takes... Yeah. So when I used to do my clinic in Leicester, I worked in Leicester before I did in London, and I had a lot of constipating conversation with family members, because everybody was living in an intergenerational house. So it had to be not a conversation just with the mother, but it might be the granny and auntie and everybody who was like looking after that child. And the managers who were really, really good, it was not like I didn't have to have that 10-minute appointment to say, here's your Mavacol, leave, this is what you do. I was quite well known for having a much longer conversation with the family and then ensuring we followed it up quite frequently with a phone call as well. But the tradition is you have a short conversation, a short appointment, and then you don't see the family for 6 months. And all of these problems are happening in between.
Yeah. And I think that kind of, we think, I guess we teach constipation, don't we, as quite a simple issue. And you just do these things and you show them the Eric video and then off they go. And actually, as soon as you start to think about it, you realize it's far more complicated than we are giving credit for, and even like being curious enough to ask about. So it's really interesting.
Well, the Japanese, sorry, just
go on.
The Japanese, because I have to tell you about the Japanese toilets. So the Japanese have understood this. If you go to, I don't know if you go to Japan or not, but if you go to Japan, they have these beautiful toilets, if you're in a nice place, which are all like very warm, heated, and they're very soft and padded. They're actually really, really comfortable. The problem then is that you actually don't want to leave them once you're sat on them because they're so nice.
And there is something, isn't there, about the whole ambience of toilets? Like, I think you talked about motorway service stations, and there are some motorway service stations where you pull up and you're like, oh my goodness, these toilets are horrific, and I'm just going to try and get in and out as quick as possible, and that's it. And then there's a couple of new ones on my dilly-dallies up and down the country to see my dad, and you're like, right, their toilets are really good. I'm going to stop there. And they feel, it is often to do with temperature, isn't it? They feel warm, they feel safe, they don't smell, they're very, very clean. All those things make a massive difference, don't they, to the kind of how even as an adult you feel about the toilet.
It's about well, it's all stimulation, isn't it? Where it's all sensory. Yeah. The smell is one thing. If a toilet smells horrific, I mean, you're going to gag. If you could all see this now, Laura is gagging. But, if you feel like you're going to, well, you do gag. If you feel sick, then you're not going to, again, you're going to go in very quickly and out very quickly, and then you get back to the same thing we've been talking about. It's cold temperature. Again, we underestimate the role of temperature. So if it's very, very cold, again, it's harder for you to go to the toilet as well. And often in some of the nice toilets, there's something for you to read and distract yourself with while you're sort of relaxing on the toilet. So I think, again, it comes back to the environment of that toilet is just as important as the time that you've got to sit there, and what's going to happen during that process. And in addition to that, we haven't really touched on, young girls really use and how they need to use toilets for their periods as well. Yeah. And that's another added problem, isn't it, that we don't often think about as well, especially when you're thinking about the locked toilets at school that we were talking about.
Yeah, the whole period thing is just awful, isn't it? I remember being like excruciatingly embarrassed that I had my period. In fact, my friendship group at school, I think there were 5 of us in our little French group, we couldn't even say the word period, so we talked about having toothache. Right. So we had this like whole code where we've got toothache.
Hopefully we moved on from that.
Well, just a bit, but yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And just that whole kind of like embarrassment, and is sanitary products available, and are there bins to put your other stuff in, and even things like knickers, like I definitely went through a period of time where I wasn't really on it with the whole period thing, and then you'd be trying to find new knickers or take the knickers off, and then where do you hide the knickers? And it's really fascinating, isn't it?
And it's not something, like you said, it's not something that people want to talk about, and people feel embarrassed to talk about. So we haven't set up a society that feels comfortable with sort of talking about things that really daily part of our life.
Yeah.
And it's like, what is it? Why are we so scared? I mean, as medical people, sometimes I find myself talking about things and other people's being shocked. It's like having the toilet talk when you're eating your dinner is something that people go, what are you going on about? And I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot I'm in a different audience here. Maybe I shouldn't be talking about this.
You're not allowed to talk about poo at the canapé meeting, Monica.
Exactly.
It just doesn't work very well.
I should have a wristband that reminds me not to do that. All the things I shouldn't talk about.
Poo-free zone.
Exactly.
So we've talked about some things that affect kind of our whole psychology, I guess, of going to toilets. And then we talked about, you and I have been working on a project about homeless families with the wider teams for quite a while, and people landing in temporary accommodation. And there's layers and layers of issues with temporary accommodation, but toileting is definitely one of the ones that is not talked about at all, isn't it? Have you seen the impact of people living in unsuitable accommodation on kind of toileting?
Yeah, and I think, again, that's why it's become very close to my heart as well, from my previous work, obviously, with children, but now in temporary accommodation. It's interesting because, as I mentioned, a lot of my work was in India before, and it was a big conversation that, you know, people shouldn't have open defecation, you should have clean toilets, all the rest of it. And I even started a project called Toilet Tales to get people to take pictures of toilets and what they look like and which ones have become store cupboards and which ones were still being used as toilets. And that really got me thinking when we came to the work in the UK, the Champions project that you're referring to, about families living in temporary accommodation or just unsuitable, insecure accommodation that they don't own and they can't make their own. What sort of toilets they have access to. And the challenge with that is that children, from our own research, we found that sometimes they're shared toilets, and that might seem okay, well, they have a toilet. But you have to queue up, you have to wait. You don't know if there's going to be some big adult who's going to be there in the queue next to you, and you're too scared as a little child to like walk past them and go to the toilet, and you might be holding on to go, and then you're frightened to talk to anyone. Even if there are toilets, sometimes they're unclean and it's not your toilet to clean. So how are you going to make sure it's as hygienic as you want it to be? So you have unclean toilets as well. And that comes into what we, for low middle incomes, called WASH, the whole water sanitation hygiene. And I really have been advocating for, well, why are we not looking at this through the lens in the UK? Why do we only talk about it in low middle income countries and not here in the UK, when there are so many problems with the toilets we have here? You know, unhygienic toilets, dirty toilets, non-functioning toilets that haven't been maintained and you can't flush either. And we found in our data, even a child was going in a cupboard, age 8, going in a cupboard in a potty because was too frightened to go to the toilet that was a shared toilet in the bed of breakfast that they were in. So yeah, some really horrible, sad stories really of frightened children going to toilets that are not being maintained properly. And sorry, we talk about toilets, but hand in hand with that goes access to water and affordability of soap to wash your hands. It's like they all go together really.
And dry them as well, isn't it? So like, and then that leads us onto wash machine access, and it leads us onto how do you clean the towels, how do you clean the clothes, and it's all linked, isn't it? We spoke at the all-party parliamentary group on temporary accommodation, and at that group we showed a video of a rat jumping out of a toilet in a B&B, and the kind of visible from around the room. But that is, you know, it's not a one-off, is it? And I think if I thought there was a rat living in my toilet, I'd never go to the toilet. I think, you know, it's just hideous. The thought, it's just awful, isn't it? It's so hideous.
It's actually it is hideous, as you say, and actually it's more common than you think. So the rats may be jumping out of the toilet, but actually rats do live around the pipes of toilets, and so they actually do bite into the toilet pipe as well. And when that happens, that's when you get flooding. So it's a bigger problem than I think people talk about. So once you get the flooding, then how are you going to get access to the toilet? And then it's going to smell. So then you have the whole problem with the smell and aroma and all of the rest of it. And then again, people are too scared to go. You can't get somebody to come and maintain it. So it leaks. Then you're trying to find other places to go to the toilet. So it's a constant dilemma trying to maintain these toilets if they're not properly supported, I'd say.
And I know that you obviously specialize in pediatrics and children, but actually when we think about the other end of the age group, I think the issues are probably very similar, aren't they? We often find that older people kind of hold on, will not go, mobility, support, access, all that kind of stuff. They also have a tendency to reduce their oral intake, so that they can control how many times they have to go to the toilet and go for a wee. So I think at either end of the age spectrum, what we're saying is where you have less choice, you have more issues with toileting, and then the consequences are quite profound, aren't they?
Yeah, so we did some work with my engineering colleague, and we started looking at all the connections to toilets and sanitation and how that impacts on your life. And there's like so many different connections. And so you talked about the elderly, but also people who may have disabilities as well, and who actually find it difficult to get to a toilet. So the toilet may be upstairs, they can't get up and down the stairs. They don't have easy access to toilets. They can't sit on the toilet because of their joints, but multiple different reasons that they may have health problems as well. And again, we talk about toilets in the general term, but then we also have to talk about it from an inclusive perspective, an inclusive health perspective. How does everybody access the toilet in the best way possible as well?
And I think that's really key, isn't it? There's first of all, there's a lack of public toilets at the moment, with them kind of closing down rapidly, councils choosing not to fund to have public toilets. We've seen a lot of our shops close. Lots of shops have taken toilets out that used to have toilets in them. And then if you think about, as soon as you've got any additional needs, so if you need a hoist, I mean, there's hardly any public toilets that have access to hoists. The radar key system kind of works, doesn't it? But our toilets to support those with disabilities nationally are just fairly shocking, really. And that's a big piece of work as well. Yeah,
and then that links to employment as well. So if you haven't got, if there are no toilets for you to access, then it's going to be harder for you to go to work, because you're not going to be able to go to work in that environment as well. So all of these things, education, employment, health, gender equality, they're all so interlinked with each other, and giving people a generally better quality of life overall.
Yeah. And you're really right, Monica, because I mean, I'm just thinking about the A&E department that I work in. It's a very busy A&E department, and yet there's 2 toilets for all the staff who work there. So pretty much every time you go for a pee, there's somebody already in it, and you have to wait. And then it's just a nightmare. And so even on a kind of just workforce issue, we haven't got this sorted, have we? We're not. They've designed a new A&E department, and there's still only 2 toilets. Why did nobody think of this? I
don't think people do. I actually genuinely don't think they do. I'm smiling at myself because it reminds me of going to St Pancras Station. Every time I go to St Pancras Station, I always forget that I should go to the toilet before I get to St Pancras Station, because when you arrive, they seem to have a lot of toilets, but not for the population and not the number of people. There's always that massive queue just leading from leading from the main area right down to where the toilets are. And I always forget I should go before I get to the station. But it's a juggle. It's a complete juggle. You're always trying to look at your watch, aren't you? How long is my travel going to be? What am I going to be doing today? Will there be a toilet? Won't there be a toilet? What shall I do beforehand?
Yeah, I hate the ones where you have to find 20p. I just don't have 20p anymore. I'm a kind of virtually cashless girl, so that always throws me as well. So you have inspired us to be more curious about toilets, and also to think of toilets as an issue of inclusion, issue of social justice. So to finish off, I just want you to think about, what is the best toilet you've been to recently? So I went to housing units, which is a shop up here in Oldham, and they have really good toilets. And the other thing is that whilst you're sat in the toilet, the sound system reads you an audiobook.
It's brilliant. I know. That must be the best one.
That's the best one I've been to for a while. Yeah. What about you?
I do like visiting hotel toilets, I have to say, because that's again, which ones are not so dark, which ones are bright, which ones have a nice candle-y smell or fragrant smell, and then which one has those nice little towels that you can clean your hands up. But the problem then is, where do you throw it? And then I stand there going, which bin do I throw this lovely nice little towel into? But yeah, I do tend to go and visit the hotel toilets just to see how they all compare. I think I should write a book on comparison of toilets around the UK.
I think there's definitely an app in this, which is ranking toilets.
Exactly.
The other one about really posh toilets is that I struggle with posh taps. When you stand there and you're like, how is this going to come on? Where do I wave? What do I, that I've been known to kind of do some mad dances in front of posh taps going, I've no idea what's going on here. There's no water coming out.
Yeah, I have done that as well. It's finding that beam that you just have to be in front of so the water comes on.
Brilliant. Well, it's lovely to chat to you again. And I'm sure we'll have you back on at some point because you are a woman with a massive range of interests and lots for us to tell about. So I will definitely be more curious about toilets and toileting from moving forward.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to have been here.